everyone and welcome! As our channel gets more and more traction on YouTube, we tend to attract not only people who are interested in the lore of League of Legends, but also people who still remember the old lore that has been retconned about 5 years ago. And this can be an issue if people really believe that the summoners are real and that the Institute of War is controlling everything. It is not, and neither of those two things exist. And this is what I would like to fix today. Today I want to end all confusions, and I want to give you guys the very base story you need to know to get started with the world of League of Legends. So forget absolutely everything you know, because I'll start from the very bottom and I'll give you all the core information. So forget the summoners, forget the Summoner's Rift, no Institute of War, let's start with the basics. The story of League of Legends happens on and around a planet called Runeterra. It is a special planet marked and scarred with magical sources. The planet appeared in Cosmos sometime after the first celestial beings appeared in the empty space. Aurelian Sol was one such a being. Aurelian Sol then came in contact with the first civilization on Runeterra, the Targonians. He then got tricked and the Targonians were able to enslave him. Pantheon is now using Aurelian as a weapon against the Void, the ultimate evil in the known cosmos. The aspects of Targon could be considered godly beings as well, but so far we only know their intentions. We know that Targon fights back the void around the universe, but the entire mythos is still filled with mostly theories. And while there are other lesser celestial beings roaming the cosmos, and there are also alien races such as the Darkin, nearly all of the story happens on Runeterra itself. But before we get into specific regions, we need to mention the Spirit Realm. Right now, we know that Runeterra has its own two realms, the physical realm and the spirit realm. The physical world is where you see humans, animals and other normal objects. But in the spirit realm you can see things that have magical or spiritual connections to Runeterra itself. It is said that magic can permanently brand non-connected beings and bind them to the spirit realm. So even if you are not born with magic inside you, you should be able to learn it through other means. I won't go into more information on this because the rest would be mostly theories. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because inside the spirit realm you have spirits and demons. These are creatures who learned how to take on physical forms to interact with beings in the physical realm. So someone like Evelyn learned how to use her body to hunt humans, and someone like Jenna used to safely guide sailors. Here it is important to mention that there are no omnious beings, especially when it comes to death. There is no god of death and there isn't even a character that would pretend to be death. And by this I mean that Kindred is just a spirit too. They currently roam the lands of the Noxian Empire. There are no all-powerful godly beings on Runeterra as far as we know. With that said, let's now go region by region and let's talk about the basics of what each place is known for. Let's start with the two most known regions, Demacia and Noxus. Demacia is a region founded after the events of the Rune Wars. These were cataclysmic battles where people used powerful stones called world runes to unleash devastating spells. Those spells were so powerful they could level mountains in a blink of an eye. During the Rune Wars there was a group of people who ran away from the mage tyrants, and on their travels they found a forest full of magical trees. Those trees were able to absorb magic, which gave them a perfect shelter against the magic-hungry archmages. The group later found out that they can use the tree bark to make something called petricite, a white stone-like material that mitigated all magical sources. This is the stone that was used to build Demacia. That's why it is mostly white. The city's history reflects on all of its characters. Galio was sculpted from petricite, so he has a lot of magic resistance. Garen is wearing armor and sword of Demacian steel. That's why he can also silence his targets and dampen magic. And since the entire nation is very anti-mage based, a lot of its heroes turned into villains since they see all magic as evil regardless of its use. Vayne is a really good example. She hunts magical beings regardless of them healing or harming people. But of course you also have people who don't believe that all magic is evil. Prince Jarvan himself fought dragons and befriended a daughter of a dragon. Shyvana is now one of his guards, and people don't know that she is a magical being. We also have Lux, a girl mage whose parents tried to cure her magical affliction in secret, because if anyone found out that she was a mage, she would be exiled. Thankfully, there are hidden sects and clans in Demacia who still trust the good use of magic, and secretly they use it for the good of Demacia. So remember, Demacia is not purely good nation. They hunt and kill wizards, witches and healers simply because they use magic. The other major Runeterran nation is the Noxian Empire. Noxus is an empire with a really long history, and it has good reasons to conquer and fight for the lands around it. Very long time ago, there was a brutal warlord called Mordekaiser. He built a fortress called the Immortal Bastion on top of a magical well that fueled his empire. It took the combined forces of all of the surrounding barbarian tribes to take the empire down, but in the end, Mordekaiser was vanquished. Years passed and the Immortal Bastion became the heart of a new empire. It was renamed to Noxus. Noxus was always led by a Grand General, but there was always a second figure who manipulated the leader from the shadows. We know this figure as the Pale Lady, a member of a Cabal organization known as Black Rose. We are also 99% sure she is LeBlanc, but it was never confirmed. LeBlanc was there even when Mordekaiser ruled the Immortal Bastion, so we know that she is pretty much ancient. When the Darkwill family came to rule Noxus, the Empire started doing really shady things. They used blood magic to resurrect powerful soldiers. They launched the invasion of Ionia. They even used children to fight in the invasion to make the Ionians guilty about it. Those were champions like Kain, Talia and Riven. But they also tried to get rid of Swain. They sent him to Ionia to die, but he survived and got a near-death vision of what hides in the heart of the Immortal Bastion. He saw a demon and the Pale Lady. With this knowledge, he returned to Noxus, removed Darkwill from the throne with the power of the demon, and started a new era of leadership. Swain realized that if there were 3 leaders instead of 1, the Pale Lady couldn't manipulate the nation into shady decisions. The current 3 leaders are Darius, Swain, and the Pale Lady. So that's how the leadership works. But there is a good reason for the nation's bloodthirsty appearance. Because the lands of Noxus were ravaged by the Darkin invasion, it's practically a desert now. They can hardly grow vegetation, and animals can't live there either. So they have to conquer the surrounding lands for resources to survive. It's not because they would be hungry for power, it's more about survival at this point. If we go south from Noxus, we'll arrive on cliffs overlooking the ocean. This is where Piltover and Zaun stand. Very long time ago, there was only one city, Piltover. Piltover was a trading city that connected the northern and southern Valoran. This gave them a massive trading advantage and a lot of wealth. But instead of spending the money on weapons and armies, they used it for research and science. They improved lives with new innovations and they launched expeditions into uncharted lands. One such expedition ended up with discovering hex crystals in Shurima's deserts. These crystals were revolutionary, because they kickstarted a brand new form of technology, the Hextech. The hex crystals are so powerful they can act as an infinite source of power. They can be used to power up heavy technology, new magical weapons, and they can even be used to power replaced human organs. The problem is that these crystals are very expensive and only the rich are able to afford them. That's why the black market of the city found out how to make synthetic fake crystals. They would hold only a fraction of the real power and they would be unstable. But these fake crystals can still be used for the same purposes. Because these new innovations made the city even wealthier, Piltover looked into improving the trading capabilities. Usually, if a trading ship wanted to deliver goods from the eastern Valoran to the western Valoran, they would have to sail around the entire continent. So, the leaders of Piltover figured out they can dig up a tunnel below the city and connect the 2 oceans. So, they set up explosives and they blew up a massive hole. The problem is that someone miscalculated the explosions and half of the city sank down. Thousands of people died that day. That's how the city was split into 2 parts. Piltover, the majestic and wealthy city on the high rocks of the cliffs, and Zaun, a city built upon the ruins of a failed innovation. Zaun is now the underbelly of Piltover. It is a city of the low-born and the poor, while all the best technology can be found above them. Down in Zaun, you can either look for second-hand body parts or experimental technology. Because the law and order of Piltover can't reach the barons and gangs of Zaun, the city is mostly ran in chaos controlled by powerful camp barons. Since this place is filled with industries making cheap body parts, watered down chemicals and fake hex crystals, the entire city is dealing with heavy pollution. Right between Zone and Piltover there is a layer of thick pollution clouds spewed up from the factories. This is called the Zone Grey. And of course, if the junk can't be burnt into smoke, it is dumped down into the sewers. All of that ends up in the sump level at the very bottom of Zone. Going even further south from Piltover, we reach the deserts of Shurima. While the Shuriman Empire is led by a single emperor, not every small city and town in the region necessarily follows the leadership. The one emperor we know is Emperor Azir, a leader who lived many years ago, but was resurrected later with blood magic and the ancient powers of the deserts. Shurima is well known for the enormous sun disk that hovers above the capital city. This device channels the cosmic powers of the sun into chosen individuals and transforms them into god warriors, who we call the Ascended. Examples of the Ascended are Nasus, Renekton or Setaka, a legendary leader of the Ascended host. The empire was mostly led by emperors who saw slavery and hard labor as necessary for the overall good of the lands. They also followed a prophecy that told them that the Shuriman Empire will one day conquer all. When Azir got onto the throne, he tried to rule for the good of his people, but his advisors still followed the traditional tyranny. When he was young, he befriended a boy slave called Zerath, so the young Prince Azir accepted him as his follower. Together they studied, learned and trained, but as they got older, Zerath became secretly angry at Azir that he didn't free all the slaves as he promised that he would do when they were young. Of course, Azir did plan to do that right after the day of his ascension. He planned it as a surprise. But before he was able to do so, on the day of his ascension, Zerath betrayed Azir, he forced the power of the Sun Disk into himself, and annihilated the empire in the process. So no one ever knew that Azir wanted to free everyone all along. That's why half of the empire loves him and the other half hates him. As I mentioned before, not every city wanted to follow the tyrannical ruling of the emperor. One such city was Icathia. It was a city led by a mage king who disagreed with them being forced into slavery just for the good of the capital city. So he rallied his armies and mages and stood up against the empire. However, when the Shuriman armies of the god warriors arrived, the Mage King had one last trick up his sleeves. His mages ripped open a rift into the void and let its horrors consume the Shuriman army. But the living horrors would not be controlled and they consumed everything. That's how the void creatures ended up roaming the deserts of Shurima. Now, if we travel east from Icathia into the ocean, we'll find a lot of different islands. The Blue Flame Isles, the Serpent Isles, but more importantly, we'll find Bilgewater. Currently, Bilgewater is now in a civil war for leadership, but it wasn't always like this. Years ago, Gangplank was the pirate king of Bilgewater. The entire city respected him and was forced into following him. But when Misfortune became an adult, she united her own small crew of followers and was able to take down Gangplank in the events of the Burning Tides. Ever since that happened, Misfortune is trying to reunite Bilgewater under her leadership, but of course there are many others who are trying to do the same. On top of all of this, east of Bilgewater we have the Shadow Isles, home to the damned souls corrupted by the Isles' magic. Every year during the Harrowing, the black mist of the Shadow Isles spreads around the ocean and tries to consume the living. And since Bilgewater is within its reach, every year it is invaded by the undead. That's why Bilgewater takes burying people seriously, and they usually make them drown, so they wouldn't be able to come back when they are risen again. When it comes to the Shadow Isles, there were times when they were called the Blessed Isles, and its lands were sacred and hidden in mists in the uncharted parts of the ocean. One day, a king from one of Valorant's kingdoms set out Callista to find a cure for his dying queen. And on her quest, she found the Holy Lands of the Blessed Isles. The king came to the Isles with his then already dead queen and tried to resurrect her. Of course, she was resurrected as a zombie and the king went mad. He wanted to end the suffering and he detonated a spell that consumed all the holy energies of that place. These events are called the Ruination, and that's how the Shadow Isles came to be. On the other side of Runeterra, to the north of Valoran, lies Freljord, the home to demigods like Volibear, Anivia or Ornn, and the home to the Iceborn, a race of human beings transformed by ancient creatures called the Frozen Watchers. Freljord doesn't have a single ruler, since living here is a battle for survival every day. The place is filled with dangerous animals, witches, mages and trolls. Currently, there are 3 nations that fight for the upper hand in these lands. The Winter's Claw, led by Sejuani, previously Serilda, the Avarosans, led by Ash, previously Avarosa, and the Frostguard, that was always led by Lysandra. The story goes that the original 3 sisters, Avarosa, Lysandra and Serilda, fought back the Frozen Watchers when they started suppressing their people. They asked Ornn to build them a bridge that would serve as a seal to hold the Frozen Watchers in the howling abyss below. But Lysandra enchanted the bridge with magic and corrupted it in the process. This corruption slowly degenerates the bridge, which will one day break apart and release the Watchers again. The last region we have to talk about is Ionia. Unlike the rest of the nations we mentioned, Ionia is not placed near Valoran, but rather on its own continent. Ionia is a place that's heavily bound to the spirit realm of Runeterra. The very land itself is touched by magic, and the creatures that live there can't be found anywhere else. Its forests are filled with magical hybrid creatures that fill the bridges between animals and humans. They are called the Vastaya. As humans arrived and spread around Ionia, the Vastaya were forced back into a hidden corner of the continent. These days it is rare to see the Vastaya freely roam around, especially after the Noxian invasion landed and destroyed half of the place. The Ionian government believes that nature will always bring balance to all things. You do not simply harm evil things, for you would be the one causing chaos. This ideology is bound to the fact that the very land itself shapes based on what's happening. Maybe one day your house is in the middle of a forest, and another day you find it destroyed by the forest roots because the trees were done with your polluting. The animals work the same way. If you respect the nature and do no harm, when the time comes, maybe the crabs simply walk from the ocean to the beaches and wait for you to capture them. The Ionian spirit of nature always rewards and punishes to uphold balance. That's why when Irelia fought back during the invasion, half of the nation were angry at her for standing up against nature. The last place marked as a region is Bandle City, the home to Yordles. Yordles are magical beings from places between the physical realm and the spirit realm. That's why no one has ever seen the city. We don't really have any information on it because the entire place is very mysterious. But we will definitely get more information on it in the future. In the past we did a lot more detailed version of this video. We released the full timeline of League of Legends. So now that you know how the regions work, maybe you'd like to learn about that as well. Of course there are also the alternative universes like the Star Guardian or the Project universe, but in this video I just wanted to talk about the basics of the main universe. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to rate it and subscribe for more lore and news. If you'd like to chat, the links to our social media, Twitch and P.O.Box with merch will be in the description. Of course, massive shout out to our patrons for going the extra mile, you guys are amazing. And with that, thank you all so much for being here and for your support, you know I really appreciate it. And as always, thank you come again.